Welcome guys, this is Mr. Ndabezita once again, and this time we will be looking at how to create our own exception classes. So it is always a wise way before we can begin everything. You know exactly that we will begin first with just an introduction that might give us just an idea as to how this will be done. But remember, we need to have a namespace where we can work on. And then this is a console application, and we will call this a, let me just call this a bank account exception. Right, it will be saved in C# tutorials, and we will use .NET 6.0, which is a long-term support. Always important that we get just an idea, a clear description of what is really going on here. So they say creating your own exception classes. Right, C# provides more than 100 categories of exceptions that you can throw in your program. To create your own exception that you can throw, you can extend the application exception class, which is a subclass of the exception, or you can extend the exception itself. So the exception is the parent class of exceptions, and you can inherit from this parent, or you can inherit from the subclass which we call the application exception class. So we will look into that. Now the very first thing that we should have is always the namespace, and we always say this is our X. And one most important thing inside of a namespace is to have a class, which we always call P, and then inside of this class we will have a static void main string of arguments. Very good. And we will just end our main. So let's just fix namespace. Very good. Everything is now fine. So I will just end the main, I will just end the class, and I will end the namespace. Everything is fine now. All right, now one thing that we will do when we are here, I think that is very important, is to create a class. We will just only run our program inside of here, but we need to create our own class, which we will call the negative balance exception. Right, I will just come here and just say negative balance exception. Very good. Now everything is happening. Everything is about to happen. Now, what is it that we are going to do in this class? It is so important that I tag this is end the class, and this one will be end the namespace. Oh, Zapapa Fanzo. Right, when we are here, we have a class negative balance exception, and we have read that to create your own exception that you can throw, you can extend the application exception class, which is a subclass of the exception. So we will look at the exception as the parent class, and then the subclass is derived from the parent. So whenever you call the application exception class, it will call the parent, which is the exception class. But we are not going to use that here. what we are going to do here, and then remember those colons tells you about inheritance. We are going to use exception, which is the parent class, not the subclass, which is the application exception class. Now, be that as it may, so in other words, the negative balance exception inherits from the exception. It will be as if all the public methods and fields and the properties that are declared inside of the exception class, they will be as if they are inside of the negative balance exception. We dealt with this when we looked at polymorphism and everything. We dealt with inheritance when we looked at, sometimes we looked at methods where we accept an object, and then we looked at many things. We looked at the operator plus, and then that accepts a certain parameters and everything. We looked at that. So this one, it's just a genie, Jesus in a bottle, right? So what we are going to do when we are here, first of all, we will have some few fields that we will declare and so on. So the very first one, we will say that it is private and it is static, so that I can have access to this via the name of the class. And then this will be of type string, and I will call this the message. So the message that I will immediately assign to that is just to say bank balance is, and then let me just say is negative. Let me just say the bank balance is negative, and then leave you with that, and just leave you with that. So what is this now? This is just a private string, public static string, and it is just a message. This is just a field that is private, that is a static, so that I can have access to this via the name of the class, because it is a static. And then the message is just that the bank balance is negative. Nothing mysterious about this. So this is private, very important, it is private, right? Secondly, what I'm going to do is just to have a constructor. So this is exactly what I have. Remember, constructors, they have the same name as the class, and they must be very public. So remember, I'm using inheritance here, and I am saying this constructor accepts no argument, but this constructor has to use the base from the exception. So when I call this constructor, the base will go into exception class and derive whatever that, because the base will always refer to the base one, which is the exception, the parent class, right? The base one, everything begins from here. Everything was inherited from you. So you are the super class. You are the basis through which everything is disseminated. Papa Fanzu. Right, and then what I will do, just an autocomplete there, and then I will just pass one argument. And then what is this argument? This argument is just the message. This is very important, very important. And the question that we need to ask ourselves is that when I have just declared a class, I have created a class, and it has a private static string, there it is, and it inherits from exception. Now, when I say I create a constructor, there's no problem with this. We understand that our constructor will accept no argument. That is fine. But I'm saying base, and I am sending this message. So what am I doing here? I am overriding. Please understand it in this way. It might not be the correct way of understanding this, but nevertheless, please do understand this, that the base message, we are overriding the method here. There is a method inside of exception, or maybe there is a property inside of this, or maybe something inside of this exception. So when I say base and I am sending this message as an argument to the base, I am overriding the message that is inside of exception, and I am sending my own message, which is bank balance is negative. So there is an overriding taking place here as a belief, because remember, I just have this class and I did not set any constructor for this class. There is nothing, I don't have any other arguments, I don't have properties or anything, and there is no class that inherits from negative balance such that I can say the base and the argument I send here is from the negative balance exception. The negative balance exception is inheriting from the exception, so it will be as if the public properties and fields and all the methods that are inside of this exception, they will be as if they are inside of negative balance exception. And when I use inheritance and I say base, I am referring to the base, which is the exception method, and then that exception method will invoke a method, but I am overriding that message with this message here. I said this might not be the correct explanation, but this is how I understand this, because this is exactly what is going to happen. I'm very sorry for that, but I think this is the way, the opening wedge through which we can understand this. But if it is wrong, we will see when our code compiles. Please, let's just wait for the results and argue based on that. Continue, Makeba. Right. Now, when we create a bank account, just as the one that we have created here, we have created a negative balance exception, and we know that this is a bank account. Right. What we can do from there, we can create properties. We can have accessors, we can have get that throws a negative balance exception when a client attempts to set the balance to a negative value. This is exactly what we can do, and we are going to do exactly that. Right. So what we are going to do, and this is very important that we understand clearly what is happening here. So one thing that we can do, we can create a class. We can come here, add, and I can create a class, and I can call this class a bank account. I can say this is a bank account, and this bank account does not inherit from anything. This is very important. All right, let me just take here and class and namespace. All right, that is fine. What I can do inside of this bank account, I can have a private. This private can be of type double, and I can say this is your balance. This is the balance that you have from your account, and I'm not assigning any number to that because I want to accept that value from the user. Right. And then I can have a public int, and I can call this an account number. And right, I can just have this property, and I can make it an auto implemented property with a get and a set. It is a property because it has a get and a set. It is public because I have to access this property outside of this class. Okay, let me just leave that. Right, I can continue from here. I have that property, that is fine, and then because I have a private double, which is a balance, I can have a constructor for that as well. It must be public, it must be double just as the balance is double, and then I'm just going to use a caps lock for the first letter, that is carry. So I will just end a property here. Very good. So I can have a get, and I know the get will only return the private member, which is the balance, and I can have a set, and then inside of the set block I can run a validation. Let me show you this. I can say if the value that you are trying to assign to the balance, if that value is less than 0, so there is something that I want to do there. Right, let me do this. If the value that you are trying to assign to the balance is less than 0, meaning it is negative, now I want to invoke now this method. I want to invoke this. I want to invoke this. How do I do this? I don't have a method in here. This is not a method. I just said I have a class which I call the negative balance exception that inherits from exception. I explained exactly what is going to happen here. And then I just have a private static string, which is a message that says that the bank balance is negative. This is all what I have. But now I am here. And when the value that you are trying to assign to the balance is negative, I want to invoke that class negative balance exception. Now the question is how I do that. I will take the name of the class, which is negative, because I know I have to access this. I know that I have to access this via the name of the class because this is static. But let's check what we are trying to do. So I have a negative balance exception. I know that this is the name of the class, and then if that is the name of the class, I'm just going to create a variable for that, which I will call just the NBE, and this is equals to new, and then you know exactly what the new means. The new means that I am reserving memory for that. Ay Papa Fanzo, ay Makeba. Right, this is fine. So what I'm doing there, I am just reserving memory for this object. I am reserving memory and space for what now? For this object of this class, which is NBE. Continue sketch. Right. Now, once that is done, let me just press the tab to auto complete that for me. Right, this is fine. So what have I done now? I call this class and I am creating memory. I am instantiating an object of the class negative balance exception, and then the object of that class is NBE. Ay make bamlocho. Ay Papa Fanzo. Now, when I'm there, I can say throw. And then what is it that I want to throw? I want to throw the message. Where is, I want to throw the NBE. Right. This is what I want to throw. Now, what will this do? What will this do in that sketch? We will see in just a few minutes. Once that is done, when I go out of this if statement, I want to have a balance. And I want to say the balance is equals to the value that you have assigned. So this method, the if statement will only be executed if the value that you are trying to assign to the balance is a negative value. Whereas if the value that you are assigning to the balance is not negative, then take that value and assign that value to the balance. I sketch. I'm Mlo. Right. Let us continue in this. This is so important. Now, let's go and try and see whether when we are inside of the main, exactly what we predicted will transpire. And then I will explain in details exactly what is happening. Right, I'm going to the program now. This is the main. This is where we always run our application, and the very first thing that we will do, remember we have a class which is bank account. Here it is. So the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to create an object of that, and here I have a bank account, and immediately an import is there for me. Right, I want to create an object of that, so I will just say this is the account and this is equals to new. You know exactly what new means. We are reserving memory for that. And remember, the bank account does not have any constructors. We do not have any constructors in here inside of the bank account. So a default constructor is provided for us, which will initialize if they are numbers, they will be 0, and so on. If they are objects, they will be null, and everything. Right. Now, I know that inside of the bank balance, inside here, there might be an error that can be thrown. I know that there might be an error that can be thrown. So because of that, I have a try. And then in the try block, I am inserting a code with a likelihood of creating this exception. So I am saying the account, the object, and I'm using the dot. Right, I have access to what now? I have access to two things. I have a property of account number and I have a property of balance, where inside of bank account, and the bank account is not inheriting from anything. I have these things here. Here it is. I have an auto implemented property, and here is the second one, which is the balance, and this one does a validation. So I'm not validating anything when it comes to the account number. You can insert any number that you want. There's no restriction with that. But there's something very restrictive when it comes to the balance. I am only accepting certain values. And then if you do not follow the dictates of Papa Fanzo, then you might as well be eliminated. Right, here we are. We have the this account number dot. So the first thing that I'm going to do via the property, I'm going to assign an account number, and I know when I assign this account number, okay, I'm just having a property there. I don't have any private thing. Okay, that is fine. So I can say my account number, let me just make it 1 2 3 4. There's no restriction when it comes to that. Any value is acceptable. Now here I am now, account number dot balance. Here is where the problem now comes. And now I'm going to send a -1,000. Right, I'm just sending a -1,000. Okay, that's fine. Let me go out of the try. Let me just say end the try. And then immediately after a try, you must have a catch block. Now, what is it that I want to catch now? I want to catch a negative balance exception, and then I am just creating an object of that. Let's check this. What is this? This is a class, negative balance exception. And when you invoke this class inherits from exception. And then I have a private static string, which is message bank balance is negative. I am having a constructor of the negative balance exception, which calls the base, which is exception, and then overrides the base message and print the message that I have set. Makeba, your explanations are phenomenal. Let's continue in this. So inside of the catch, I just want to have a simple console.writeLine. And I just want to say, okay, e dot message. You remember this. You remember this comes from the exception class. You must never forget this. This comes from the exception class. And what is this? This is a property. A property that is found inside of a class, which we call the exception class. Alright, that is fine. And then I want to have again a console.writeLine. So let me just copy from this and let me just paste. Right, that is fine. And then I just want to have another one which we call stack trace. And also it is a what? It is a method, a detailed method that tells you exactly where the error might have occurred. So this one goes straight as to tell you that bank balance is negative. It just goes straight, it doesn't waste any time. This one gives you a detailed, clear description as to exactly where the error might have occurred. Run your code. Let's just try to run our code and see exactly what is going to happen, and allow the explanations of Papa Fanzo to be applied. Let's just allow the explanations to reveal themselves. Let's see exactly whether what we have said will be fulfilled or not. Now, let me do this. Let's come here. The first thing, I have a restriction inside of the bank balance, bank account. And the restriction is saying, if the value that you are assigning to the balance is a negative value, negative balance exception has to be thrown, and it will throw that error. I have created an object of the negative balance exception. What is this now? What is this? An object. I have created an object of the negative balance exception, and I have also reserved memory for that. And then what is it that is going to do? It's going to throw what now? I'm sending the object there. Right. If the value that you are trying to assign to the balance is a negative value. Whereas if the value that you are trying to assign to the balance is not negative, take that value and assign that value to the balance. Now let's check. Here you are, and you have a balance, and you are sending a negative value. So when you are sending a negative value, it will see that, okay, you sent a value that is less than 0. It will go in here and execute that. When it executes that, what is going to happen? It will go to the negative balance exception. Here it is. And then what message is it that it is going to throw? It is the message, the very first one, that says bank balance is negative. But that is not all. You said when the negative balance exception has occurred, you want to print the message, which is the message that we have, balance is negative, and you also want to tell us the stack trace where the error might have really occurred. Where? Now let's go through it. Add bank balance exception. So let's go to the bank balance exception. Bank account exception. Right, bank account exception number 13. Bank account exception. No. That is not where the error might have occurred. Line. Let's check. Bank account exception, program.cs. You see, in the program.cs, line 13. So in line 13, what we are simply saying is that in line 13, that's where the error might have occurred. Bank account exception program.cs. Where is program.cs? Here it is. In which line? Line 13. When you assigned a negative value, this is what caused the error, the exception, to be thrown. That's exactly what has transpired. And again, where is it? And again, when a negative value is assigned, you will have a negative balance exception. So when a negative value is assigned, this is exactly what is going to happen. So it is so important that we try to understand that, right? It is very, very important. We could have chosen, however, in here, suppose we don't want to say e.message, but we can say you should throw. Okay, let me just leave this one. We can come here, and here when we say throw, we can also say, okay, instead of sending the object that I have, okay, but let me not confuse you with that. Please let me not confuse you with that. I think let's just leave it here. In the second tutorial, I think we will deal with that. Let's just leave it here, guys. I hope that you have saw what is happening, you understand thoroughly why things are the way in which they are. Let's just cut it here, and I will see you in the next tutorial.